Imagine a police officer stepping in front of a raging grizzly to save a stranded driver, or a teacher shielding her students from an attacking bear. These encounters with wild bears reveal moments of courage and survival instincts pushed to their limits. From a family's close call in Wyoming to a lone hunter's battle in Idaho, each tale reminds us of the respect the wild demands. Join us as we explore 6 stories of heroism against nature's powerful predators. On a chilly November morning in 2024, Officer Mark Reynolds, a dedicated and experienced law enforcement officer, was carrying out his daily patrol in a remote Alaskan town. Known for his calm demeanor and quick thinking, Mark was familiar with the unpredictable nature of the wilderness that surrounded this small town. With years of service under his belt, he had encountered all kinds of wildlife and weather conditions. However, nothing had prepared him for the unexpected challenge he was about to face on that forest road. As Mark carefully navigated the winding forest road that morning, the dense woods on either side created a sense of isolation. The towering pine trees and thick undergrowth were both beautiful and intimidating, a reminder of nature's presence in this part of Alaska. Suddenly, his gaze shifted to a stationary car ahead, parked on the narrow shoulder of the road. The engine was running, but something seemed off. The quiet of the forest made the scene feel even more unusual, and Mark's instincts immediately kicked in. He knew that vehicles stranded in such remote locations often posed challenges, and he prepared himself to offer assistance. As he slowed his patrol car and approached the vehicle, he noticed a lone driver inside, visibly distressed. Mark's training took over as he carefully assessed the situation, preparing to offer assistance and calm the driver's nerves. However, before he could fully understand the nature of the motorist's problem, an unexpected rustling sound caught his attention. He turned his head toward the dense tree line on the right side of the road, his hand instinctively moving toward his equipment. Emerging from the trees was a massive grizzly bear, its eyes locked onto the stranded vehicle and Mark's patrol car. The bear seemed agitated, perhaps provoked by the presence of humans and the scent of the car. Its imposing size and powerful stance were clear indicators of the potential danger it posed. Mark knew that grizzly bears in Alaska were not uncommon, but encounters at such a close range were rare and often hazardous. Within seconds, the bear began to move closer, its steps heavy and purposeful. Mark realized he had very little time to act. His priority was clear: protect the motorist and prevent any escalation. With practiced precision, he positioned himself between the bear and the stranded vehicle, his mind racing through his training and past experiences. As the bear drew nearer, he decided to deploy his bear spray, aiming carefully and releasing a mist into the air. However, the morning wind betrayed him, carrying the spray away from the bear instead of toward it, rendering his initial defensive tactic ineffective. The bear continued advancing, undeterred by the ineffective spray that had drifted away in the wind. Mark's heart pounded as he weighed his options. Every second felt stretched, and he knew he needed a quick yet careful response to protect both himself and the motorist. Backing up slightly to maintain his position between the bear and the vehicle, Mark tried to recall every piece of training he had ever received about handling bear encounters. He knew sudden movements could provoke the animal further, yet the bear's aggressive approach left little room for hesitation. The grizzly was now just a few feet away, its powerful frame casting an imposing shadow on the ground. Mark held his ground, reaching for his next line of defense, his service firearm, which he hoped to use only as a last resort. Instead of firing at the animal directly, he opted to try non-lethal deterrence first, hoping to frighten it away. Carefully, he raised the firearm and fired a warning shot into the air, the sharp sound echoing through the trees. For a brief moment, the bear paused, seemingly startled by the sudden noise. Mark took a deep breath, hoping the warning would be enough to send the bear retreating. But after a moment's hesitation, the bear seemed to recover, shifting its gaze back toward Mark with renewed intensity. Determined not to provoke it further, Mark lowered the firearm, keeping a steady, calm stance. He made himself appear as large as possible, hoping this would discourage the bear. The bear's movement slowed, but it remained cautious and alert, clearly assessing the situation just as Mark was. The standoff continued, both man and animal locked in a tense silence, each aware of the other's presence. The motorist, still inside the vehicle, watched with wide eyes, fearful but trusting Mark's judgment and experience. After what felt like an eternity, the bear seemed to lose some of its initial interest. It lowered its head, giving Mark one last look before turning its attention away from the patrol car and the stranded vehicle. Mark held his breath, watching carefully as the bear slowly retreated into the dense trees. He stayed still, ready to act if it decided to return, but the forest eventually swallowed the bear's hulking figure, and the sounds of its heavy steps faded. Only once he was certain that the bear was gone did Mark allow himself to breathe a sigh of relief. The motorist, visibly shaken, stepped out of the vehicle, gratitude evident in every step. Mark reassured him, explaining how close they had come to a serious incident, while emphasizing the importance of remaining calm and making calculated moves. He walked the motorist through a few basic tips on wildlife safety, stressing that being aware of one's surroundings and understanding animal behavior could make all the difference in an encounter like this. Back at the station, the story of Mark's bravery quickly spread, capturing the attention of his fellow officers and the town's residents. The dashcam footage recorded every moment of the encounter, serving as a reminder of the dangers that officers face even in the quietest of towns. Mark's quick thinking, calmness under pressure, and dedication to protecting others were celebrated, and he was praised for his heroic actions that day. For Mark, the experience left a lasting impact. While he had always respected the power of nature, this encounter solidified his understanding of the unpredictable reality of the wilderness. His survival instinct had kept him focused, but the memory of that tense standoff with the grizzly bear became a story he would carry with him, a reminder of the delicate balance between humans and the wildlife that share the land. On October 12, 2024, Megan Lewis set out on one of her favorite trails in the Great Smoky Mountains, a place she had visited countless times. A seasoned hiker and wildlife enthusiast, Megan had spent years trekking through forests, mountains, and various terrains across the United States. Friends and family admired her deep respect for nature and her knowledge of the wilderness. In her mid-30s, Megan often spent weekends exploring the hidden gems of the Smokies, capturing the beauty of her surroundings with her camera. She was known for her commitment to safety and for always following the necessary guidelines, never underestimating the wild places she loved. Megan's backpack was stocked with essential items, including water, a first aid kit, extra layers, and most importantly, bear spray. She understood the risks that came with hiking in bear country, especially in the autumn season when bears are actively preparing for winter. Her bear spray was a precaution she carried with care, despite her hope that she would never have to use it. As she started her hike that morning, she felt the familiar excitement of being surrounded by towering trees, colorful autumn leaves, and the gentle sounds of the forest. The day was peaceful as Megan ventured deeper along the trail, the crisp air and golden sunlight filtering through the trees, adding a sense of calm. She kept her distance from wildlife, observing from afar without disturbing their space. Her respect for nature was evident in every step she took, mindful not to leave a trace behind. The trail was familiar, but each visit felt new, as the changing seasons brought fresh beauty to the mountains she cherished. Around midday, Megan paused near a small clearing to take in the view. As she admired the vibrant colors of fall, a rustling sound emerged from behind a thicket nearby. She froze, her senses alert, recognizing the need to stay calm and observe from a distance. What she didn't realize, however, was that she had unknowingly walked between a black bear mother and her cubs, who were hidden in the dense bushes just a few feet away. The mother bear, startled by Megan's presence, perceived her as a threat to her cubs and reacted defensively. In an instant, the bear rose on its hind legs, making its powerful form visible through the trees. Megan's heart raced as she reached for her bear spray, understanding the urgency of the situation. Her hand tightened around the canister, but to her horror, it malfunctioned. The spray refused to release, leaving her vulnerable at a moment when she needed it the most. The bear, agitated and protective, began to advance, moving quickly toward her, its instincts triggered by the presence of a perceived danger to its young. Megan attempted to back away slowly, trying to avoid sudden movements that might provoke the bear further. Her knowledge of wildlife encounters told her that staying calm was essential, but the malfunctioning spray left her feeling exposed. She continued to retreat, but the bear's defensive instincts were stronger, and it closed the distance between them swiftly. Taking slow steps backward, her heart pounded as the bear continued to advance. Each movement seemed to make the bear more determined, its protective instincts flaring as it sensed her near its young. Megan kept her hands visible, resisting the urge to run. She knew that turning her back or showing fear could trigger an even more aggressive response. Despite the intense fear building up inside her, she maintained her gaze on the ground, avoiding direct eye contact, hoping to signal that she was not a threat. The bear's deep growls echoed through the clearing, growing louder as it came closer. Megan felt her breathing quicken, her mind racing to find a way out of this situation. She considered climbing a nearby tree, but the nearest sturdy branch was too high. Every second felt like an hour as she weighed her limited options, realizing that escape might be impossible. The bear, now only a few feet away, reared onto its hind legs again, towering over her with an intimidating presence. She could feel the raw power of the animal and knew that one swipe of its powerful paws could be life-threatening. Just as Megan steadied herself for the worst, a loud crack sounded from the trail. Another hiker had arrived, and the sudden noise distracted the bear for a brief moment. It turned its head, ears twitching as it analyzed the new sound. Seizing the opportunity, Megan increased the distance between herself and the bear, stepping slowly backward without making a sound. The bear shifted its attention between Megan and the source of the noise, briefly torn between defending its cubs and investigating the disturbance. As the bear hesitated, Megan continued to inch her way toward a cluster of large rocks nearby. She knew that these rocks might provide enough cover to hide or at least create a small barrier if the bear pursued her again. The other hiker, realizing what was happening, froze and slowly backed away, giving the bear a wide berth. For a few tense moments, both Megan and the hiker watched as the bear lowered itself to all fours, scanning the area one last time. It sniffed the air, keeping its eyes on Megan and the trail, but gradually backed off, moving toward the hidden cubs in the bushes. Once the bear had retreated fully, Megan let out a shaky breath, her entire body trembling with relief. She and the other hiker exchanged a glance of shared understanding, both shaken yet incredibly grateful to be unharmed. Megan took a few moments to gather herself, realizing the full weight of what had just happened. The encounter had been a brutal reminder of how unpredictable wildlife could be, even in familiar environments. Megan's experience quickly spread among the local hiking community, leading to conversations about safety measures and the need for increased awareness when trekking in bear territory. Park officials reviewed trail safety guidelines and placed new warnings at the entrances, reminding visitors of the dangers of wandering too close to wildlife. In memory of Megan's love for nature and her unfortunate encounter, a new workshop on hiking safety and wildlife respect was introduced, educating others on how to handle unexpected encounters in the wild. The incident left a lasting impression on everyone who knew her. Megan's story served as a reminder of the importance of respecting the wilderness, even for the most seasoned enthusiasts. Her friends and fellow hikers remembered her passion for nature, carrying her spirit forward by sharing her story and advocating for responsible hiking practices. The mountains, once a place of solace for Megan, became a symbol of her deep connection to the wild, a connection that would inspire others to tread carefully, honoring both the beauty and the dangers of the natural world. On the evening of August 15, 2024, the Johnson family settled into their campsite in a wilderness recreation site in Wyoming, excited for their second night under the stars. They had looked forward to this adventure for months. Tom and his wife, Linda, had decided to bring their two children, 12-year-old Emily and 9-year-old Jake, to experience the beauty of the wilderness firsthand. They had left their phones and gadgets behind, hoping to escape the rush of daily life and enjoy the natural beauty around them. With towering pine trees, open skies, and fresh mountain air, it felt like the perfect place to bond and reconnect as a family. As they prepared for bed, the night air grew cool, and the sounds of the forest filled the campsite. Earlier in the evening, they'd enjoyed a dinner of grilled sandwiches and snacks around the campfire. After cleaning up, they settled inside their tent, chatting and laughing about the events of the day. They shared stories, played a card game, and felt a sense of calm, unaware of the lurking danger. They hadn't given much thought to the importance of the food storage guidelines mentioned by the ranger at the park entrance. The ranger had advised them to keep their food secured in designated storage bins to prevent attracting wildlife, especially bears. But, caught up in the excitement, they had accidentally left a small bag of food just outside the tent, not realizing the potential consequences. The bag held the remnants of their evening snacks, including crumbs from sandwiches and a few candy wrappers, enough to catch the attention of an opportunistic black bear searching for a late-night meal. Around midnight, a faint rustling sound stirred Tom from his sleep. Half awake, he thought it was just the wind moving through the trees. However, the sound grew louder, accompanied by a low grunt. His heart began to race as he realized it wasn't just the wind or small animals. He reached over and gently tapped Linda, who stirred, alerting her to the unusual noise. The children, still sleeping soundly, remained unaware of the growing threat outside. Tom peered through a small opening in the tent and saw the shadowy figure of a black bear only a few feet away from their tent. The bear, drawn by the smell of the food they had left out, rummaged through their belongings. Its large, muscular frame and dark fur were barely visible in the dim moonlight. The sight filled Tom with dread as he understood the gravity of the situation. The bear sniffed around, nudging the scattered food items, then slowly turned its attention toward the tent. Tom's mind raced as he recalled what he had read about bear encounters. He knew that panicking would only make things worse. He whispered to Linda, reminding her to stay calm and not make any sudden noises, hoping his steady voice would keep everyone composed. In a tense moment, the bear began to claw at the outer fabric of the tent, making long, scratching sounds that grew louder with each pass. Tom's thoughts raced as he considered how to protect his family from the massive creature now just inches away. With a deep breath, he tried to recall the ranger's advice about what to do if a bear came too close. Tom remained calm as he remembered the ranger's instructions, which had stressed the importance of making oneself appear larger and remaining as composed as possible. He knew that one wrong move could provoke the bear further. With another deep breath, he whispered to Linda and the kids to stay silent and remain still, hoping this would keep the bear's attention on him. He slowly unzipped the tent, moving carefully to avoid alarming the animal. Outside, he stood up straight, raised his arms, and began making himself look as big as he could. He spoke in a steady, low tone, hoping to convey that he was not a threat. The bear, now fully focused on Tom, paused and stared, its dark eyes watching him intently. It took a few heavy steps toward him, sniffing the air, its massive form looming in the faint moonlight. Tom's heart pounded, but he maintained his posture, knowing that any sudden movements could escalate the situation. As he stood firm, Tom noticed that the bear seemed hesitant. It continued to sniff, moving closer to the ground where it had detected the scent of the leftover food. Tom realized that the bear was likely just searching for food, not trying to attack them. He knew this moment was crucial. He needed to make it clear to the bear that the campsite was not a place to linger. In a slow, deliberate motion, Tom stepped backward, maintaining eye contact with the bear. His calm movement signaled that he was in control, and he hoped this would encourage the bear to back away. For what felt like an eternity, they were locked in a silent standoff, each step cautious and calculated. The bear hesitated, then took a few steps in the opposite direction, its nose close to the ground, as it followed the scent trail away from the tent. Relieved, Tom continued his steady approach, still keeping himself between the bear and his family. Finally, the bear turned away completely, retreating into the shadows of the forest. Tom exhaled, feeling the tension release from his body as he watched the bear disappear into the trees. He quietly stepped back inside the tent, where Linda and the children were still holding their breath, waiting for his signal. He gestured that it was safe, and they all sat together, shaken but incredibly grateful that the encounter had ended without harm. As they huddled together, the weight of what had just happened began to sink in. The children, though initially quiet, whispered about how frightening it had been to hear the bear so close. Tom and Linda reassured them, explaining how they had done everything they could to stay safe. In the silence that followed, they all realized how fortunate they had been, and how crucial it was to follow proper safety practices when camping in bear country. The next morning, as they packed up their campsite, the family reflected on the events of the night. They discussed what they had learned about respecting wildlife and the importance of properly storing food to avoid attracting animals. This experience had given them a newfound respect for the natural world. along with a greater appreciation for the power and unpredictability of the wild animals that called this place home. As they drove away from the park, they couldn't help but feel both relieved and a bit wiser. The encounter had been frightening, but it also taught them valuable lessons that would stay with them for life. Tom and Linda knew they would never forget that night, and they hoped their children would carry those lessons forward, understanding the importance of respecting nature and all its inhabitants. On October 15th, 2024, award-winning photographer Liam Hart, known for his stunning wildlife photos and daring nature shots, set off on an assignment in Alberta's Rocky Mountains. With a passion for capturing the wilderness and a reputation for going to extreme lengths for the perfect image, Liam had become an admired figure in the photography world. He often spent days or weeks in remote locations, waiting for the ideal conditions and willing to do whatever it took to get his shot. His adventurous spirit and impressive portfolio had earned him awards and recognition worldwide. This time, his goal was to photograph a grizzly bear in its natural habitat. The rugged, breathtaking landscape of the Rocky Mountains had always held a special allure for him. The chance to capture a bear against the dramatic backdrop of the Canadian Rockies was an opportunity he couldn't resist. Despite his extensive experience with wildlife, he was acutely aware of the risks involved. The park authorities had recently issued warnings due to increased bear activity in the area, advising all visitors to keep a safe distance. However, Liam believed that his knowledge of animal behavior and photography skills would keep him safe. Early that morning, he set out with his camera, heading deep into the park, where he hoped to find a grizzly. Equipped with his usual gear, he also carried bear spray, though he rarely had to use it. Liam was accustomed to working alone in unpredictable environments and had confidence in his ability to handle close encounters. As he trekked through the dense forest, he noticed signs of recent bear activity, scattered paw prints and broken branches, hinting that a bear might be nearby. Liam finally spotted a large grizzly feeding in a clearing by a cluster of berry bushes. His heart raced as he observed the bear from afar. The scene was exactly what he had envisioned. The bear against a backdrop of rugged mountains, surrounded by the vibrant colors of autumn. It was the kind of shot that could capture both the power and tranquility of the wild, and he wanted to ensure every detail was perfect. He positioned his camera and took a few test shots, admiring the results. In his quest for the ideal angle, Liam moved a little closer, hoping to capture the bear's features with greater clarity. As he adjusted his position, he became fully absorbed in his work, determined to frame the scene from a dramatic perspective. Focused on his camera, he failed to realize that he had entered the bear's feeding territory, moving closer than he had intended. Intent on his mission, Liam was unaware that the bear had begun to notice his presence. As Liam continued adjusting his camera, he remained oblivious to the subtle warning signs. The grizzly, now fully aware of him, lifted its head, sniffing the air and watching Liam closely. Its relaxed stance shifted as it recognized that an intruder had entered its feeding ground. Bears are fiercely protective of their territory, especially when food is involved, and this bear was no exception. Unaware of the growing tension, Liam took a few more steps forward, inching closer, and focused intently on framing the perfect shot. Suddenly, the bear's behavior changed. It let out a low, rumbling sound and fixed its gaze on him. This was the first clear sign of aggression, but by the time Liam looked up, the bear had already begun to move in his direction. Realizing the danger, Liam felt a jolt of fear. He tried to stay calm and recalled the advice he had heard countless times. Do not run, appear non-threatening, and back away slowly. But in those few seconds, the bear's initial charge closed the distance rapidly. The situation had escalated far beyond what he could manage. Reacting quickly, he fumbled to activate his bear spray. However, the unexpected speed of the bear's charge and his own rising panic made it difficult to focus on using the deterrent effectively. He raised his camera instinctively, using it as a shield and trying to make himself appear larger. Desperate, he even flashed the camera in the bear's direction, hoping the bright light might halt its approach. But the bear was undeterred, now fully committed to defending its territory. The powerful grizzly swiped at him, knocking him to the ground. The impact was overwhelming, and Liam's equipment scattered across the forest floor. Lying there, he felt the immense weight of the animal's presence looming over him. The attack was swift, And in those agonizing moments, he was at the mercy of a wild creature far stronger and faster than himself. Every lesson he had learned about wildlife safety seemed distant and futile as he faced the raw force of nature. Other hikers later found Liam's camera and belongings scattered around the clearing where the encounter had unfolded. It wasn't long before park rangers, following reports from concerned friends and colleagues, tracked down his location. The scene was both sobering and tragic, marking the loss of a passionate photographer whose life had been dedicated to capturing the beauty of wildlife. His camera, though damaged, held the final images he had taken, pictures of the bear in its natural environment, blissfully unaware of the impending confrontation that would follow. The news of Liam's passing spread quickly, sending waves of sorrow through the photography and nature conservation communities. Those who knew him remembered him as a fearless artist, dedicated to revealing the beauty and mystery of the wild. Yet his tragic encounter served as a harsh reminder of the risks associated with venturing too close to nature's untamed inhabitants. The incident sparked renewed discussions about the importance of respecting wildlife boundaries, especially in parks, where human interactions with animals are becoming increasingly frequent. In the months that followed, park officials tightened regulations around bear activity areas, adding clearer signage and enforcing stricter safety distances. His death became a sobering testament to the unpredictable dangers present, even for the most experienced individuals in the wilderness. Visitors to Alberta's Rocky Mountains and other natural reserves were reminded that wild animals must be respected from a safe distance, a lesson etched into the legacy of a photographer who loved nature deeply but underestimated its unpredictable power. On October 10, 2024, a group of eager middle school students from Denver arrived at the wilderness of northern Colorado for an educational field trip. Led by their passionate science teacher, Mrs. Caldwell, they were excited to learn about the unique ecology of the Rockies. Mrs. Caldwell had meticulously planned this trip, knowing how important it was for her students to experience the wonders of nature firsthand. The air was crisp, and the golden leaves of autumn surrounded the group, adding a magical touch to their outdoor classroom. Mrs. Caldwell was more than just a teacher to her students. She was their mentor and a true nature enthusiast who took joy in sharing her knowledge of the environment. She had spent weeks preparing them for this excursion, emphasizing the importance of respecting wildlife and staying together as a group. To her, this trip was more than an academic exercise. It was an opportunity to foster a lifelong love and respect for nature in her students. The students were absorbed in identifying plant species, observing animal tracks, and learning about the ecosystem's delicate balance. Mrs. Caldwell led them along a lesser-known trail, chosen specifically for its rich array of flora and fauna. She encouraged them to make notes, ask questions, and immerse themselves in the experience. Her dedication was evident as she patiently answered every question, taking her time to explain the details of the natural world around them. However, as the group moved further along the trail, an unexpected intense silence fell. Just ahead, among the dense trees, they spotted a black bear. The bear, likely foraging for food, hadn't noticed the group at first, but as the students shifted slightly, the bear lifted its head, becoming aware of their presence. Mrs. Caldwell knew they had to remain calm and cautious, fully aware of the potential danger that lay ahead. Instinctively, Mrs. Caldwell took control of the situation, reminding her students to stay quiet and avoid any sudden movements. She could sense their fear, especially as the bear began to show signs of agitation. With calm authority, she instructed everyone to slowly start backing away, gesturing with her hands to keep them calm. The students, trusting her implicitly, followed her lead, taking careful steps away from the bear, which was now observing them intently. As they moved, one of the students, frozen by fear, lagged behind, unable to follow Mrs. Caldwell's instructions. The bear's gaze shifted, locking onto the isolated child. Mrs. Caldwell noticed immediately, and without hesitation, she positioned herself between the bear and her students, focusing on diverting its attention. She made herself appear as large as possible, trying to draw the bear's focus away from the frightened student. The bear, feeling threatened and unsure of the sudden movements, began to take cautious steps forward, its attention now entirely on Mrs. Caldwell. The students watched in silent terror, realizing the gravity of the situation and the courage their teacher was displaying to protect them. Every second felt like an eternity as they saw Mrs. Caldwell standing firm, her sole intention to keep her students safe. With the bear's attention on her, she signaled silently for the students to move back further, urging them to find a safe distance. As Mrs. Caldwell continued to stand firm between the bear and her students, she kept her attention focused on ensuring the bear stayed away from them. She moved carefully, striving to appear calm and unthreatening while keeping the bear's focus on her. However, the bear seemed increasingly unsettled, pacing closer as it sniffed the air, clearly agitated by the unexpected presence of people in its territory. Mrs. Caldwell knew she had to hold her ground to keep the bear's attention away from the children, even as her own fear grew. Behind her, the students watched in horror and admiration, frozen by a mix of fear and respect for their teacher. Slowly, they began to grasp the depth of her bravery. She was risking everything for their safety, putting herself directly in harm's way so they could escape. The students, hearts pounding, retreated even further back as instructed, moving as quietly as possible to avoid drawing the bear's attention. In a sudden, intense moment, the bear charged toward Mrs. Caldwell. She attempted to maintain her stance, but the bear's strength was overwhelming. The students looked on, horrified yet helpless, as their teacher faced the full brunt of the animal's aggression. The bear's powerful charge left her no chance to retreat, and despite her best efforts, its immense power overpowered her. She had protected her students at great cost, her final act one of courage and dedication. As the bear finished its charge and wandered back into the forest, the students rushed toward their teacher, but the scene left them in shock and sadness. Park rangers, alerted by nearby hikers, arrived shortly after and ensured the students were taken to safety. The tragedy left everyone shaken, and Mrs. Caldwell's sacrifice quickly became a story of inspiration and sorrow for the entire community. In the aftermath, Mrs. Caldwell's bravery was honored by her school and the community. Parents and teachers alike shared stories of her kindness, her commitment to teaching, and her unwavering love for nature. This incident prompted an immediate review of safety measures for all school excursions into wildlife areas. Her actions underscored the critical importance of respecting both the wilderness and the creatures that inhabit it, reminding everyone that wild animals, no matter how familiar they may seem, are inherently unpredictable. For the students, her memory lived on as a powerful lesson in courage, sacrifice, and the sometimes harsh realities of nature. They carried her teachings in their hearts, inspired to approach the natural world with both wonder and caution, forever changed by the profound example she had set. In early October 2024, Greg Thompson, a skilled outdoorsman with years of experience, set off on what he expected to be another successful solo hunting expedition in the secluded forests of Idaho. Well prepared and confident in his survival techniques, Greg had ventured into the deep woods many times before, finding solace and challenge in the quiet solitude. Armed with his hunting rifle and a survival pack, he planned to track deer along the game trails that led deep into the forest's heart, far from any signs of civilization. The landscape was rugged and dense, filled with towering trees and a cool, crisp air that signaled the arrival of autumn. The vastness of the wilderness seemed to embrace him, with golden light filtering through the leaves as he moved quietly, mindful of his surroundings. Greg relished the feeling of independence the forest offered, a stark contrast to the hustle and bustle of city life. However, he was also aware that the Idaho forests were home to unpredictable wildlife, including the powerful grizzly bears that roamed these remote areas. As Greg moved further along a narrow trail, he came across fresh deer tracks and cautiously followed them, hoping for a successful day of tracking. His focus was intense, each step measured as he navigated through the thick undergrowth. Suddenly, he stumbled upon an unusual sight, a pile of leaves and branches concealing a large mound. Curiosity took hold as he examined the pile, wondering if it might be a natural formation or the result of animal activity. In a matter of seconds, his instincts kicked in. Realizing what he had uncovered, his heart raced as he recognized it as a bear's food stash, a hidden carcass likely left by a grizzly to return to later. But it was too late. A massive grizzly bear emerged from behind a nearby tree, its eyes locked onto him, enraged by his intrusion. The bear stood on its hind legs, towering over him, its fierce growl filling the air, a clear warning that he had trespassed into its territory. The bear's sudden charge left Greg with only seconds to react. Without hesitation, he lifted his rifle and fired a shot that echoed through the trees. Though the sound startled the bear, it did not deter the creature entirely. The bear closed in, swiping its massive paw at Greg and knocking him off balance. He felt the weight of the blow as he hit the ground, his body jolting with pain. Deep wounds from the bear's claws marred his leg and arm, and intense pain radiated through him. Dazed but determined, Greg pulled himself back, his mind racing to find a way out of the deadly encounter. Blood seeped from his wounds as he scrambled to distance himself from the bear. Thankfully, the shot had startled the bear enough to drive it back, and after a tense moment, it finally retreated into the dense trees. Greg watched as it disappeared, his breaths coming in gasps, his entire body trembling from a mix of adrenaline and pain. Once he was sure the bear was gone, Greg took stock of his injuries and realized the severity of his situation. Far from help and with substantial wounds, he understood that his survival depended entirely on his ability to think clearly and act quickly. With pain pulsing through his injured arm and leg, Greg knew he had to act swiftly to survive the aftermath of his encounter with the grizzly bear. He struggled to stay calm, aware that panic would only worsen his condition. Assessing his surroundings, he noticed a sturdy tree nearby and, using every ounce of strength, dragged himself toward it for support. Resting against the tree's trunk, he took deep breaths to steady himself, knowing he had to conserve his energy for the long hours ahead. The immediate challenge was to stop the bleeding. He reached into his pack and retrieved a strip of fabric, fashioning a makeshift tourniquet around his leg to stem the blood flow. The pressure was intense, but he gritted his teeth, focusing on the task at hand. He tied a second strip around his arm, using his uninjured hand to tighten it as best he could. These measures were crucial to prevent blood loss and give him a fighting chance as he waited for help or found the strength to move closer to safety. Greg's mind raced as he calculated his next steps. He knew he was miles from any marked trail, and his chances of being found in this remote section of the Idaho wilderness were slim. He needed a signal for help, but he had no way to communicate directly with anyone. Checking his gear, he found a mirror in his pack and decided to use it to reflect sunlight during the day, hoping it might catch the attention of a passing search team or other hikers. As the day wore on, the forest grew colder and he began to feel the effects of his injuries more intensely. Knowing he couldn't remain exposed through the chilly night, he gathered nearby branches and dry leaves to create a basic shelter against the base of the tree. He built a small fire from twigs and dry leaves, hoping it would keep him warm enough to stave off shock or hypothermia. He kept the fire low, not wanting to attract any further wildlife. Each passing hour tested his patience and resilience. Greg monitored his injuries, keeping the tourniquets tight and taking small sips of water from his canteen. By the third day, his condition worsened, and the threat of infection loomed. His wounds were inflamed, and the dull ache had turned into a sharp, searing pain. However, his determination did not waver. He focused on surviving 1 hour at a time. On the fourth day, as Greg's strength waned and hope began to fade, he heard distant voices breaking through the stillness of the forest. His heart surged with relief as members of a search and rescue team emerged through the trees. He had been missed, and his absence had raised the alarm, leading to a search that ultimately saved his life. Greg's ordeal became a testament to sheer resilience, reminding him of nature's raw power and the respect it commands.